Welcome to Craig's Gun Channel. This week we're going to cover the Walther PP series handguns. The PP series was originally developed and released by German arms manufacturer Karl Walther in 1929 and was intended to be used by police forces in Europe in the 1930s. In fact, the PP name originates from the intended use, the police pistol. There are blowback-operated semi-auto pistols available in cartridges ranging from .22 long rifle to .380 ACP. They feature an exposed hammer, traditional double-action, single-action trigger mechanism, a single-column magazine that holds from 6 to 10 rounds depending on the model and the caliber. They have a fixed barrel that also acts as the guide rod for the recoil spring. And the series includes the Walther PP, PPK, PPKS, and the PPKE models. The PP and PPK were among the world's first successful double-action semi-automatic pistols. They're still manufactured by Walther and have been widely copied. The design inspired other pistols including the Soviet Makarov, the Hungarian FEG PA-63, the Polish P-64, the American Accutech AT-380, and the Argentinian Bursa Thunder 380. The PP and PPK were both popular with European police and civilians for being reliable and concealable, and during World War II, they were issued to the German military, including the Luftwaffe, as well as the police. The most common variant is the Walther PPK. A smaller version of the PP with a shorter grip, barrel, and frame. It also had a reduced magazine capacity due to that shorter length. A new two-piece wraparound grip panel construction was used to conceal the exposed backstrap, and the smaller size made it more concealable than the original PP and hence better suited to plain clothes or undercover work. It was released in 1930. There are some differing opinions as to the origin of the K moniker, with some thinking that it represents Kurs, or German for short. However, there is early advertising literature that denotes the name actually represents the Polizeipistole Kriminalmodell, or detective police pistol. The PPK was what Adolf Hitler used when he shot himself in the Führer bunker in Berlin, but of course, it's most famous for being the fictional secret agent James Bond's gun in many of the films and novels. Bond switched from the Beretta he normally used to the PPK in the 6th book in the series, Dr. No. That was also translated later into the film version, and ever since the PPK and Bond have been intertwined. The PPK-S was developed following the enactment of the Gun Control Act of 1968 in the United States. One of the provisions of this act banned the importation of pistols and revolvers not meeting certain requirements of length, width, and height, and other sporting features. The PPK fell just short of these requirements, and as the U.S. was the PPK's largest market, Walther addressed the situation by combining the slightly larger PP's frame with the PPK's barrel and slide to create a pistol that weighed slightly more than the PPK. The additional ounce or two of weight of the PPK-S compared to the PPK was sufficient to provide the extra needed import points and allow it to be imported. However, as the rules kept changing, they would on occasion still run into importation problems, and as United States law allowed for domestic production of the PPK, manufacture began under license in the U.S. in 1983. Currently, PPK and PPK-S models are available in the U.S. The example I have here is a stainless PPK-S in 380 that was produced in the U.S. by Smith & Wesson. Let's take a closer look. Of course, before doing any work on a firearm, you do want to make sure that it is in fact empty with no ammunition in it. With the Walther PPK, there is no manual slide lockback feature. So to lock the slide back, you have to have a magazine, an empty magazine in it, and it will lock back at that point.
7.65 mil with a delivery like a brick through a plate glass window. Takes a Brausch silencer with very little reduction in muzzle velocity. The American CIA swear by them.
Lock the slide to the rear. We can then visually inspect and look to make sure that the firearm is in fact empty and safe. The only way to release the slide would be to remove the magazine, and then when you pull the slide back, it will then unlock and go forward. So let's go over the basic controls of the firearm. We have the magazine release, which is right there. You simply push in on that and that releases the magazine. You have the trigger. The trigger on the Walther PPK is a double action, single action trigger. In this particular mode, it is set up for double action. What that means is when you pull the trigger back, it will cock the hammer, and then at the end of its cocking cycle, it will release the hammer to allow firing. like so. It's a fairly stiff trigger, so I'll try to do this as slow as I can. As you pull the trigger back, and then it releases and fires. On the recoil, the slide would come back, ejecting the round, and then it would lock the hammer back, ready to fire the next round. The trigger would go to the single action mode, which requires just a light trigger pull to fire the weapon. It does have a manual safety. The red dot means it is ready to fire. To put it on safe, you would simply push that down, and that would lock it from being able to function all the way. Pulling the trigger back will pull the hammer back somewhat, but it doesn't go back far enough to cock the firearm, and of course it won't release it. This also functions as a decocking lever, so if the firearm were in fact, the hammer was pulled back and it was cocked ready to fire, when you pull the safety down, it will put the firearm on safe and then release the hammer, releasing spring tension. If you notice the trigger didn't move, that's normal operation for it. When you put it back on fire, it will then release the trigger. Then you could use the double action to either cock the hammer back to fire it, or you could manually cock the hammer back. There was a safety recall that was put out for some Smith & Wesson PPK and PPKS produced from March of 2002 through February of 2009. The defect allowed certain pistols to inadvertently fire when the safety was disengaged. I've listed the relevant serial number range, and if you're not the original owner, or if you're just unsure if the firearm was sent in for warranty repair or not, the repaired pistols were marked by a punch dot at the back of the frame. I hope this information has been of assistance to you, and as always, if you should have any questions or comments, just let me know. And until next week, stay safe.